Welcome. Happy Earth Day, or is it? Let's take a look at what's happened over the last year and see whether we've made a great deal of progress in that time. My general conclusion is that we have not, and we need to do more. First, let's take a look at the amount of greenhouse gases still in the atmosphere and what their trends are. The most important one is carbon dioxide, and that has surpassed 420 parts per million. You can see the long-term trend does not look altogether promising. Most of that carbon dioxide is coming from the burning of fossil fuels. Methane is now past 1900 parts per billion, and if anything, the rate of it accumulating in the atmosphere is increasing. Methane is a much stronger greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide, so that is concerning. The methane is mainly coming from the extraction of fossil fuels and from farm animals. Nitrous oxide, N2O, has passed 335 parts per billion, and that is continuing to rise as well, although that looks more linear, but it certainly hasn't tailed off. That's mainly coming from the use of nitrogen fertilizers and farming. Lastly, the biggest contributor is water vapor, and that's been going up steadily for the last few decades. Now, water vapor is a greenhouse gas and a strong one, but its concentration in the atmosphere depends on the temperature of the atmosphere. So in fact, what it does is it amplifies the effects of the other greenhouse gases. When they warm, it increases the amount of warming, and when they cool, it increases the amount of cooling. So it's sort of a secondary greenhouse gas. If greenhouse gases have been increasing in the atmosphere, you'd expect temperatures to be going up, and that's exactly what they've been doing. In fact, the last 9 years have been the hottest 9 years on record. The record may be much longer than that, because if you go back before 1850, that was the Little Ice Age, where we had 500 years of relatively cool temperatures. So it is unlikely they had anything equivalent to the current temperatures. We'd have to go back to 6000 BC to the climatic optimum to find temperatures that are equivalent to than what we're experiencing now. With increasing temperatures, we're losing ice, both sea ice and land ice. So let's first take a look at land ice, because that actually increases sea level. According to the record, we've gained 9 inches of sea level in the last 150 years. That's the equivalent loss of about 1,100 square miles of land, or about 750,000 acres. The projection is that we're going to get another 1 to 8 feet of sea level rise in the next 77 years. That would take another 1,450 to 11,700 square miles of land away from us, which is about 1 to 8 million acres. So every time sea level goes up, we lose acreage. But there's a lot of other problems associated with sea level rise, like more effective storms and things of that sort. What about sea ice? There's a problem here, particularly in the Arctic, that we're losing all of the old ice. That's ice that's more than 3 or 4 years old. You can see it's marked here in red and orange. And 50 years ago, that constituted about 40% of the Arctic ice. It's now less than 10%. We're not only losing ice, but we're losing forest as well, particularly in the Amazon. 27% of the Amazon will be gone by 2030 if the current rate of destruction of the rainforest continues. It's not being helped by the fact that large areas of the Earth are in drought. For example, the western United States and the southern states, and particularly Texas. We have northern Africa and southern Europe that are in major drought, as is South America and the southern tip of Africa. Relatively dry conditions in the southern part of Australia. This is all not foreboding very well for us. With drought comes the risk of wildfires, and in the US at least, the number of wildfires has been going up steadily over the last few decades. The same is true in Europe. We've had major wildfires there as well, even in wet old England. The problem is that when it does rain, it really pours, and you get flash floods. The weather pattern that we're getting currently seems to be long periods of hot, dry weather followed by torrential rain. Flash floods are now common where they were not before. We've had some in our local area here. California, for example, has just got the largest snowpack on record. What happens when all of that melts? There's been tremendous loss of life due to these sorts of floods. In fact, flooding is one of the major causes of weather fatalities. Once again, with so much energy in the atmosphere, major storms like tornadoes are on the rise, and you can see the number of tornadoes has been steadily increasing in the US over the last 70 years. And this year seems to be one that's been producing a number of particularly deadly tornadoes. As temperatures rise, so do sea surface temperatures. That's increasing the intensity of the largest hurricanes. You can see here sea surface temperature is steadily increasing, and superimposed upon that is the intensity of various hurricanes, and they are increasing steadily over the last few years. You can look at this in a number of different ways, but one of the easiest ways to look at this is how much damage are all these storms doing. And the 5 most expensive years in US history have all been in the last 20 years. Now these have been corrected for inflation, so that's not an excuse for these higher numbers. We'll see what this year holds, but the average is about 50 million per year, and we could easily well exceed that this year. One of the things that disturbs me most is that greenwashing is rampant. This is when large corporations engage in false advertising, say how conscious they are of the environment and how they're working to save it, when in fact they're doing absolutely nothing, or in fact still harming it. For example, McDonald's introduced paper straws, which it made a big fuss about some years ago. Turns out those paper straws were not recyclable either, so that they had no advantage. Coca-Cola has lots of green ads nowadays, but they are actually the worst plastic polluter in the world. H&M, the fashion house, 96% of their environmental claims are actually false. HSBC claimed to be funding transitioning away from fossil fuels, but invested nearly $9 billion to find new sources of oil and gas. So what can we conclude from all of this? We're not doing enough, and what we are doing is not fast enough. Things will be getting a lot worse before they get any better, and even if we act decisively now. One thing is, if you live near the ocean, move to higher ground while your property is still worth something. Don't invest or buy products of greenwashing companies. And the most important thing is to elect better representatives, ones that do actually care about the environment and will do something about it. Thank you very much for listening, and I repeat, Happy Earth Day to you. Hopefully next year we'll have a more positive report. So until next time, stay safe and goodbye.